Hello there, friends. Welcome to another episode of Brown Bags and Bibles. We are here to break down life's biggest befuddlements with biblical basics. I'm Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church of Greene County, Tennessee.
Led by the Lord?
Led by...
That'll work.
Yes.
Led pastor, led by
I'm
the Lord and the
that's
elders.
True.
Yes. And I am one of those elders. My name is Mark Liebert. I'm Scott's wingman for these series we do.
Indeed. And today we continue probably part 2 of 2, I'm thinking.
Well, maybe. We'll see if we get through it. I would hope we can, but we'll see, because it's still pretty lengthy.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Part 2.
But it won't be longer than 3.
2 or 3 episodes on our Sanctity of Human Life position paper.
Right.
Position papers are written by the elders occasionally on particular things that we need to be on the same page about. Lots of folks have questions about.
Yeah. People will ask from time to time, what are our views?
Yeah.
And instead of riffing, we actually have papers we've written with our views.
We'll riff here.
Well, yeah. But from a document.
Yes. We do not want to riff out of nowhere. That's usually not pretty.
And we said this last week, but we draw from multiple sources when we pull these together, because many churches, Christian universities, whatever, have position papers on various subjects.
And are dealing with these things as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we begin with that. So lest you think, wait a minute, I've read that somewhere else. We're telling you, you've read a lot of this somewhere else. That's fine. And we give credit in our papers to where we're drawing from. So that's fine.
Hey, there's nothing new under the sun.
No, there isn't.
Including ideas. So this is part 2 of Sanctity of Human Life. Yep. And last week we talked about the image of God as the sort of theological foundation for everything that we're saying here. And then we talked about some particulars of contraception, in vitro fertilization, reproductive cloning, biomedical research, stem cell research, genetic intervention, and vaccines.
Yes, we did.
So today we turn to abortion.
Yeah, and then just a couple things on capital punishment and euthanasia. Really, probably should have covered those last week, but we thought of those as we were going through this.
Yes,
this was a draft paper.
Yes.
So we've added that to it. So you want to hit those first and then get to abortion?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay.
Begin.
All right. So capital punishment in Genesis 9:6, it says God requires the crime of murder to be repaid by the forfeiture of the criminal's own life. It says, if anyone is guilty of shedding blood, by man shall his blood be shed.
Yep.
So God is establishing here the obligation to carry out the most severe punishment for the worst crime. Mm-hmm. And this is significant because at this place in the Bible, it took place long before the establishment of the people of Israel.
Yes.
This is not part of, as it were, the Mosaic law.
Right, it's before all that.
It's before all of that. And so the principle then has relevance for all humans for all time.
Yes, indeed. So, capital punishment. That's. I mean, there are other places that Scripture touches on it.
Yeah, there are.
But that's the foundational place.
Right. So our view is it's a biblical requirement. But, and I was talking with someone about this, given the practical issues within our justice system, things like eyewitness misidentification, the lack of attorney representation for those underprivileged, misapplication of forensic evidence, false or coerced confessions, racial bias, the large number of exonerations we've seen, and the irreversibility of the penalty.
That's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. What we're saying is the extent to which capital punishment should be applied is not always clear.
Right.
Therefore, Christians may respectfully disagree on this issue. And for further details regarding the arguments on both sides, there's a couple good arguments. Our one is why I support capital punishment by the Gospel Coalition. That it originally began with Charles Colson. Many of you will know that name. And then another one, why I oppose capital punishment. And again, not so much the principle as it is the mechanics of working it out within a flawed system. So our statement is we support it because it is a biblical requirement, but it's not so black and white as just willy-nilly go kill people.
Yeah, so the statement includes those, however, given the practical issues within our system in a broken world where things don't work perfectly, where we cannot mete out cosmic justice as alone God can.
Right.
We have to have some, not sure what the right word is here, but understanding, that things may be
some caution.
not perfect.
Yeah.
So there you go. Capital punishment. Euthanasia/assisted suicide. We do have another link here to look at from gotquestions.org.
A helpful website we've mentioned many times.
Yes, indeed.
If you think, I need to ask Scott this question theologically, we would recommend go to Got Questions first and see if it answers it for you to save Scott's time.
And then when you come to me and go, that doesn't sound right.
They're not flawless, of course, but they are an excellent resource.
Euthanasia and assisted suicide. From Scripture, it teaches that life is a sacred gift from God, Genesis 2:7. Death is an enemy.
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 15.
The last enemy to be destroyed is death.
Yep. Ecclesiastes 8:8 says, no man has power over the wind to contain it, so no one has power over the day of his death. Job 30 says, this is verse 23, I know you will bring me down to death, to the place appointed for all the living. In other words, God has the final say over death.
Right. Including
and life.
Revelation 21:4, which is that death will be no more once the curse is reversed. Mm-hmm. So important that we start with these scriptures.
Yes. So life is a sacred gift from God. Death is an enemy. God's purposes in pain is the next section here.
Right. Because we understand the practical reasons behind why some people choose euthanasia or want to assist with suicide, because there's pain involved. It's always because there's pain involved.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But God has purposes in pain.
Yes, indeed, which Romans 8 explains. 18 through 25, suffering is the result of the curse of sin in the world, resulting in futility, bondage, corruption, groaning, and pains. However, God allows a person to suffer for a long time before death. Other times, a person's suffering is cut short. While we don't understand all the reasons, we know that God has a purpose for everything. Ephesians 1:11 says that God works all things according to the counsel of his will, his desire. James 1:12 explains that God intends to bring blessing through trials. Romans 5 teaches that tribulations bring about perseverance. Acts 4, Genesis 50 show how God uses the evil of human sin even to accomplish his plans for good. Romans 8, God promises to work all things for the good of his children, including conforming us to the image of Christ. Therefore, it's not our place to question God's sovereignty. Rather, we must learn to exercise faith in God's purposes.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to say here is we need a theology of suffering.
Absolutely.
And we don't have that very well in America or the West. We avoid suffering at all costs. We medicate for every possible pain that we might have. We don't suffer well as a people.
No, when we can have material control over our lives with a luxury that's unprecedented in world history, of course we don't.
Yeah.
Because we can do everything. We can do things that weren't even conceivable 50 years ago,
right?
That mitigate pain and suffering. And so we begin to have this idea that that is far more possible than really it is.
Right, and it leads us to the incorrect conclusion then that all suffering and pain should be avoided.
Absolutely.
But that's actually not biblical.
No, it's not.
And so that's the point we're making here, is that while we want to be sympathetic to those who are in pain due to disease or whatever else, that pain in and of itself has a purpose that can be redemptive. And we listed several things here. God works his will through pain. He brings character change through pain. He teaches us trust in him through pain. So many things are cut short when we eliminate pain. So pain by itself is not a problem. It actually can be a great blessing from God. Though, of course, those who suffer from it feel it heavily. So it just,
which isn't an argument for let's go pro-pain.
No. It's an argument for, before we just assume the answer to any pain is medicate it or escape it.
That's right.
Perhaps we need to wait and trust God's sovereignty in it.
Yes, and ask those kinds of questions before we do everything possible to mitigate it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's, Anyway.
So our official stance is we view the practice of euthanasia and assisted suicide as evil because God alone is sovereign over when and how a person's death occurs.
Yes, which we'll get into with abortion as well.
We will. This leads into that.
Yep. Some considerations here. We should never seek to prematurely end a life, but neither must we go to extraordinary means to preserve a life. There's some wisdom here. It's a wisdom issue.
Primarily because we live in a world where technology has advanced so much, we can play with death, as it were.
Yes, To actively hasten death is wrong. To passively withhold treatment can also be wrong. but to allow death to occur naturally in a terminally ill person is not necessarily wrong. And that is even to allow death to occur naturally in a terminally ill person, even if you could do things to mitigate it further.
Right.
Yeah, that's not necessarily wrong.
No.
Anyone facing this issue should pray to God for wisdom. James 1:5. Seek godly counsel within the family of faith, and engage medical professionals with compatible ethical standards who can help you make wise, informed, practical decisions so that you will understand the implications.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it calls for wisdom and accountability and input from godly people, but hopefully that provides a basic framework that God alone holds the power of life and death, that pain in and of itself is not a problem by itself, and that there are issues that are gray when it comes to end of life. So seek wisdom, godly counsel, engage medical professionals who have trusted ethics.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
But we are against euthanasia and assisted suicide in principle.
On I was going to say,
on the face
principle.
of it,
Yep. So, abortion
yeah.
is next.
I mean, we've sort of been talking around it, in it, through it, but now let's hit it.
So, First Christian Church views the practice of abortion. I'm just reading from the paper. And by the way, if you haven't gotten to it yet, the link is in there. By the way, I forgot.
Is it not the updated one?
No, it's not.
Okay.
it's the not updated.
So if they were looking for what we just talked about, they're like, what are they referring to?
Exactly. That's the next point I was going to make. I'm fine with you talking about it. It's not in there, what we just talked about.
But it will be.
And some of my notes are. So you're welcome. First Christian Church views the practice of abortion as an evil that has been inflicted upon millions of innocent babies. I just read some of this a couple times recently, 42 to 3 million worldwide per year, which is insane.
It's staggering.
First Christian Church views the practice of abortion as an evil that has been inflicted upon millions of innocent babies and that will threaten millions more in the years to come. Abortion is a morally unacceptable alternative for birth control, population control, sex selection, elimination of the physically and mentally handicapped. Certain parts of the world are already experiencing serious population imbalances as a result of the systematic abortion of female babies, especially. That's true.
China, for one.
Some African countries as well. The advocacy and practice of so-called partial birth abortion of babies is particularly heinous.
Yep.
So that's the basic statement.
Yeah.
Let's talk about sexual responsibility is the first heading here. And we'll talk about sexual responsibility, personhood of the unborn. There's a lot there to talk about, especially from a biblical vantage point. And killing of an innocent persons, danger to the life of the mother, rape, incest, emotional, spiritual toll, women's right to choose, and then Christian obligation, just to give you a little preview there. Sexual responsibility, contemporary demands for abortion. Often, I said always, flow from the practice of sexual freedom without corresponding responsibility. This is a huge, important first thing to say, I think.
It is. It's why we have it at the beginning.
Yeah. The demand for abortion often flows from the practice of sexual freedom without corresponding responsibility.
Often, not always, often.
The scriptures speak definitively against premarital and extramarital sexual intercourse and declare such activity to be sinful. Exodus 22:16, Acts 15:20, 1 Corinthians 6:9, 13, 18, Galatians 5:19. I also thought of, there are a couple more places like Exodus 22, Deuteronomy 22, 28 and 9.
5, Ephesians 4, and there's plenty.
Yes, there are plenty.
Flee from sexual immorality. There's all sorts of things.
Yes. To add abortion as an after-the-fact birth control device is to deepen and compound the sin with resultant guilt and emotional distress. First Christian Church affirms the biblical mandate for sexual purity and responsibility that, when obeyed, will obviate, which just means to anticipate and prevent, and eliminate situations in which abortion might otherwise be contemplated.
Yeah, so basically we're saying let's start with the obvious, which is if sex, the expression of sex is limited to a man and wife within the context of marriage, amazingly abortion would drop dramatically.
Yes, indeed.
Which was God's design.
I think it's important to simmer on the idea that taking responsibility for one's actions ensures that the whole question of life and death is left to God alone. Which means that the entire, if one is presented with, do I get an abortion or not? This question of life and death hanging in the balance means your life lived by taking responsibility for one's sexual activity, an entire life of living that with integrity, in other words, raising your children, that's a better choice and more pleasing to God in his intent for the world and for you, and for the fullness of creation, than gerrymandering ways around personal responsibility.
Yeah, we've talked in the past about why would you push, people ask this question in several of our episodes, why would you push a Christian worldview on a world that is not Christian? What gives you the right to do that?
Yes.
Any more than a non-Christian secular view, we don't want it to be pushed on us. And part of the argument we've made is if you operate the machine according to the design of the designer, it works better all around.
Yeah.
And this is an example of that. Sex was designed to be expressed within a heterosexual marriage covenant. Well, when that's done, babies are not slaughtered.
And that's for the good of the world.
It's for the good of the world,
Christian,
and particularly
non-Christian.
for those babies.
Yeah.
But for everyone. Well, it's a culture of death.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is.
Yeah, that would be the argument we'd make is we're saying God's design is for human flourishing.
Yes, and reproductive rights and things that, you put the word rights on anything nowadays, and it becomes another another intersectional definition of individual autonomy run amok. So that just because you put the word rights on something and reproductive rights doesn't mean it becomes a moral good.
Right.
Unless individual autonomy is in every possible way the moral good, which that's anarchy.
And that's where we are in many ways. Like that's the highest good is to be able to run my life as I please, when I please,
which
how
ties
I please.
into what you're saying about this is for the good of all creation.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. Sexual responsibility. Personhood of the unborn.
Yeah.
The Bible does not distinguish between prenatal, preborn, and postnatal life. It attributes human personhood even to the unborn child.
Which is an amazing thing that we'll see in Scripture.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Right.
This shows up a lot more than people may think it does in some cool ways that we're going to see here.
Point that out.
Yeah, this extends to the unborn child ex utero as no less a human being than the child in utero.
Right.
The Scriptures regularly treat the unborn child as a person under the care of God.
A person under the care of God.
Yes.
So we're going to see that.
Yes. And we're just stewards along the way.
Right. But see how Scripture, from God's perspective, thinks of the unborn child. Look at the words used.
From the first stages of pregnancy, it recognizes a woman with child.
With child.
In the first stages of pregnancy.
Not with fetus.
Right.
With child.
When the Virgin Mary was chosen to be the mother of Jesus, an angel made the announcement in Luke 1, "You will conceive and give birth to a huios, a son."
A son.
The angel then informed Mary that her cousin Elizabeth was pregnant and said, "Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a huios, a child, a son, in her old age." So Scripture makes clear that in the prenatal phase, both Jesus and John the Baptist were recognized as males.
Males. Children. Male children.
Yeah. Yeah. Persons made in the image of God.
Yes.
Which is to say that persons with inherent worth and value, regardless of their perceived value to the world or to society or to the social construct of what constitutes fitness for contributing to society, that wasn't the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well before the time of delivery, they were recognized as males.
And if you listen to that terminology, compare it to what you hear often in our media today, they talk about fetal pulsing and things like that.
I've heard some great lengths to which people will go so as to not state the obvious that everyone knows.
What fetal pulsing?
And we'll get into this later.
You mean the heartbeat of the child?
Exactly.
But it's called fetal pulsing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's not the terminology Scriptures use, which is the point we're making.
Correct. There's more to say about even this. John before birth is recognized as a baby, Luke 1, 41 and 44. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. That translates a Greek word for children both before and after birth. That's the key point there.
Yeah.
The Bible always recognizes the prenatal phase of life as that of a child and not a mere appendage to the mother's body to be aborted at will.
Right.
So even when pregnancy in Bible times was due to an illicit relationship, we just talked about husbands and wives.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about out of wedlock.
Rape, incest.
As well as others. Even when pregnancy in Bible times was due to an illicit relationship, the sanctity and value of that life was not questioned.
Nope.
The daughters of Lot, willfully, meaning of their own will and machinations and power, became pregnant by alcohol and had an incestuous relationship. Right. In Genesis 19. Bathsheba gave birth to Solomon through her marriage to King David. That came about through...
Not through, though her marriage.
Oh, though... Bathsheba gave birth to Solomon, though she was married to King David, and that came about through an adulterous relationship. Yep. In none of these cases is the life of the unborn considered unworthy, not valuable, and it did not require an abortion in any of those cases.
Right. Yep.
So the first point is the Bible recognizes child in the first stages of pregnancy, just as outside of. The Bible, number 2, recognizes that God is active in the creative process of forming new life.
God is involved. It's not just as we would say it's science and how it all works together. No, Scripture says God is involved.
Yeah. Specifically
involved. I love this concerning Leah, Jacob's wife. Scripture said, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive. So she became pregnant and gave birth to a son.
Yeah, we can call all of that enablement whatever we want in scientific terms, in biological terms, in embryonic plus kinds of terms.
Right.
And yet, the parts that we will not understand and cannot describe accurately fit under he enabled.
Yes, he enabled.
I'm always astounded at how many people, once you start to have babies and realize that and see that and experience that, you go, it's a miracle. I mean, it's a miracle.
Yeah. When Job compared himself to his servants, this is Job 31:15, he asked, did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one form us both within our mothers? It doesn't get any clearer than that.
That's right.
That God is actively involved in that creative process.
Yep. That each person yet unborn has equal value and status before God is indicated in his declaration. In Job's declaration, that God shows no partiality to princes, does not favor the rich over the poor.
No.
They're all the work of his hands. This is how people will often say, oh, you Christians, all you care about is these political issues of pro-life, before birth, etc. That is a function of the wider care of God for the world, period, and for the flourishing of all. He shows no partiality, does not favor the rich over the poor. They're all the work of his hands. So that kind of stuff is an extension of all are made in the image of God and are valuable, period.
Right.
Yeah. And there are some categorical differences between those who are living and those who are not. And that's some fallacy in some of that limiting of you Christians are just about.
Yeah. And we can talk about
that later.
Yeah, we will.
God spoke through Isaiah. This is what the Lord says. He who made you, who formed you in the womb. Isaiah 44. Listen to me, you islands. Hear this, you distant nations. This is Isaiah 49. Before I was born, the Lord called me. From my mother's womb, he has spoken my name.
There's a personhood right there. There's a relationship. I may not have known him, but he knew me.
Yes. Verse 24, Isaiah 49. This is what the Lord says, your Redeemer, the one who formed you in the womb. I am the Lord who has made all things.
Yeah, if we're not as familiar with our Old Testament, we're missing out a ton of statements like this, which form our theology and help us understand a Christian worldview.
Yes, much of the outgrowth of a Christian worldview has that substrate in principle form in the Old Testament that we're not keenly aware of as much as we need to be.
But probably the one Christians know the most is Psalm 139.
Go for it.
For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Clear as day, God is active in the creative process of forming new life, has plans and purposes for that child, and knows that child personally.
Yep. So the Bible recognizes a woman who is with child before and after all stages of pregnancy. Second, the Bible recognizes God's active in the creative process of forming new life, as you just said. Thirdly, the Bible recognizes God has plans for the unborn child.
Yeah.
Only he knows the potential of this new life.
Yeah.
When God called Jeremiah to the prophetic ministry, he said, "Before you were born, I set you apart." When Zechariah the priest was ministering at the altar of incense, an angel announced that Elizabeth would give birth to a son who should be called John. It was revealed that God had plans. He was to be forerunner of Jesus. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is to never take wine or fermented drink. He will be filled with the Holy Spirit, even before he is born. That's fascinating.
It is. And which is why he leapt.
Yes.
When Mary came to Elizabeth.
Yes.
And John leapt in his mother's womb.
Luke intentionally puts that in there so that people are aware God is doing this because he has plans for the Messiah.
Right.
So the Bible recognizes God has plans for the unborn child. Fourthly, the Bible recognizes that God is sovereign in all things, including the quality of life of the unborn child.
Right. Which we start to get into. We think we can determine whether it's good for this baby to be born or not. And that's where we cross a line into playing God. You'll hear it all the time. Well, what about the quality of their life?
Right.
Well, what about it? Do you have that ability to understand the future fully and know the quality of their... Do you have that ability? And if you did, do you have the right to make that decision?
Yeah.
You don't have either.
And there is some, I'm not sure if contradiction is quite the right word, but there is some anachronism in arguing about this as a potential, why don't you, when for many of the ones we're talking about, this is not an actual possibility.
Yeah, right. Ask a child who their their parents considered abortion and they chose not to. Ask that child, who is now grown, if they think their quality of life is worth living. They will tell you they're glad they're here.
When people reject God, they may more easily cheapen human life and make it relative. Some are considered worthy to live, others considered expendable. Who but God knows? The person who was destroyed in the Holocaust might have discovered a cure for cancer.
Right. Who but God knows what blessings millions of children killed before birth might have brought to improve the quality of life.
That's right.
We're saying that their quality of life is such, either for them or for the mother or whatever, that it shouldn't be brought about. What about the opposite argument?
And there's some argument from silence. And one of the points we've made in a couple episodes recently is that the quality of life we all enjoy today is the result of people who are part of the human flourishing project that God makes happen.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the point we were making. When people set themselves up as God to determine if a life is worth living, whether before or after birth, they usurp the sovereignty of the Creator.
Yeah.
There are finite things humans cannot understand. God's ways are above human ways, Isaiah 55. So while medical technology may now allow prenatal diagnosis of some medical conditions, it is critical to remember that God's love is unconditional and above any consideration of physical or mental limitations. Thus, while it may be permissible to pursue prenatal testing so as to better provide for the needs of an unborn child, it is impermissible to use prenatal testing to determine whether or not an unborn child should be allowed to live.
Yep.
I have a friend, I'll leave it at that, at my work, who is pregnant with their first child. Very excited.
Yeah.
And they had one of those tests done because the doctor recommended it. And the test came back, I'll cut a long story short, with a false positive that said such child may have mental disabilities.
Yeah.
Over several weeks, it was ruled out, oh no, that was a false positive. Your child's actually fine.
Yep.
In the meantime, the incredible stress and pain and worry that mother and father went through, who never intended to abort their baby anyway, was completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
And she said to me, with my next child, when they say, would you like this test done? I will say, over my dead body.
That's right.
It will not be done.
That's right. Been there, done that. So let me insert some parenthetical stuff about the personhood of the unborn stuff.
Okay.
Because there's a lot that we've talked about in biblical categories, which is all good and right, and I don't disagree whatsoever. But I want to say some things about some philosophical and biological stuff. So take away the Bible. What makes this a person is a big question. And the main gist that we Christians make from our worldview, and it can go all the way back to Genesis when it talks about after its kind, that there is literally everything needed for a fertilized egg to become a fully grown human being.
Yeah.
From the exact moment of conception.
Yes.
Everything that is required for that fertilized egg to become
in the DNA
is in there.
Yeah.
So that is a difference between a secularized, a godless ideology and a Christian worldview. The moral value for us depends on the kind of thing you are, not on the things you are able to do. And that's
good.
One of the main distinctions,
yes.
I think.
And we have touched on that a little bit.
Yes. So if you're conceived by or generated from a human being, then you are a human being.
Right.
That's just done. It's
what
a
else
done
could
deal.
you be?
Right. What else could you be? Actually, almost all scientists, embryologists, biologists, and even I'll call them pro-death, pro-choice folks like Peter Singer, who is a public intellectual for lots of things. They agree overwhelmingly that at the moment of conception onwards, the unborn are human beings because from the moment of conception, they have everything it needs, given time, nutrition, hospitable environment, to develop into the mature form of the kind of thing it already is.
Yes.
And so that's not even like scientifically debatable. Basically, the question is, what's a person? And so they try to distinguish between human beings, humans, and persons, which I think is a facile distinction. There's some philosophical things there, but so that's the main issue that's mostly at play here.
Yeah.
There's a really, there's a really great video. There are lots of videos like this and lots of people who make these kinds of arguments, but there's a Christian named Tim, I'm not sure how you say this, HSIAO, Dr. Tim HSIAO. If you look up Dr. Tim abortion wrong on YouTube, it'll come up. He gives a really good case for the full personhood of the unborn that is based on the categories that pro-choice people make about degreed persons. They'll say, in order to be a person, you have to have at least 2 of these 5 qualities. And it doesn't account for like changes in, like when someone's in a coma. Are they suddenly not a person then?
Right.
Are they not a human?
Right.
Then?
I've heard some of that. Yes.
Yeah, a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. So that's a really good thing to look up.
Yep.
If you're listening about that.
Yeah, I have watched some of that, and it's helpful.
Yeah. So, killing of innocent persons.
Right. Next category. God's word is very explicit concerning the taking of innocent human life. You shall not murder is one of the 10 commandments. It's also, though, a moral imperative that recurs throughout Scripture. Quite clearly.
Yes. God even inspired Moses to include in the Scriptures a law that brings the sanctity of the lives of unborn children into focus. Exodus 22, this is a fascinating passage. If men who are fighting hit a pregnant woman, and she gives birth prematurely, but there's no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Principle being, as is still on the books in many states, though this is going away, that an injury to the mom carrying a baby counts as 2 murders. That's not always the case anymore. And many of those laws, I think, are slowly going away, but I don't know recently.
Yeah, the implications here, to draw it out. So the value of the life of both the mother and the child is such that if there's no critical or lasting harm to either, then the responsible party's fined.
Sure.
However, if either the mother or the premature child is seriously injured or dies, then the severe penalties of the law are to be applied. Probably things like manslaughter. It is clear that the life of the unborn child is precious, and even a non-premeditated murder, in this case, inflicted on the unborn, is a serious crime.
Yeah, you just talked about the non-premeditated part. Wrapped up in the Hebrew word for murder in the 6th commandment is causing human death through carelessness or negligence even. Somehow contributing even if by lack of care.
Right.
So God's attitude toward the killing of innocents is clear. No one is guiltless who takes the life of another, with the possible scriptural exceptions of capital punishment administered by a system of justice.
Which we talked about.
Yep. Unintended killing and self-defense, which we didn't, but
no, but happens.
It does. And deaths occasioned by duly constituted police and war powers.
Right.
So let's talk about danger to the life of the mother.
Right, because this comes up a lot.
Yes, it does. In the modern era, situations in which pregnancy seriously and imminently threatens the life of the mother are exceedingly rare.
Yeah, I think we need to say that.
Yes.
We hear this argument as if this happens all the time. Mm-hmm. It does not happen all the time. It is very rare.
It does. No, pregnancy is a complicated, as are all procedures.
But it is rare.
This is about 10 years old, but 0.2% is something that I've known is the number of abortions that are done to save the life of the mother. I think that's the verbiage that I remember.
The number you remember is 0.2%?
0.2%.
Okay.
Yeah. If, however, responsible diagnoses confirm that childbirth is likely to result in the death of the mother, historic Christian faith usually has favored the life of the mother above that of the unborn child. Unlike the unborn child, the mother is a mature person with established family and societal relationships and responsibilities, which I would like to point out is a principle that cuts both ways, meaning plenty of moms, husbands and fathers would say, okay, we've had wisdom issue, 2 children. You're in your mid-30s and not getting younger. I don't know, I'm just making this up.
Yeah, careful where you go with that.
So, yeah.
How about the woman says, I say?
I'm just getting there.
As opposed to you, the husband.
That's just ad hominem.
I know where we're going.
So the established ties that are potential for the unborn child is an argument no differently than the other side.
Sure it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is why we have this next paragraph.
Yes. However, vague threats to the mother's physical or emotional health must not become an excuse to place the child at risk. Any intervention required must have the intent. Any intervention required must have the intent of saving the mother's life.
Like that's the intent of what we're doing.
Yes. Not the prior intent of causing death to the child.
That's huge.
Yes. And the intent piece is huge.
Yes, it is. All right.
Meaning we cannot possibly, even with all our amazing precision in scientific and medical control, we cannot meaningfully account for every possibility. We have to work based on intent.
Sure.
Otherwise, every doctor is responsible for everything bad that happens medically, period.
Yeah. Yeah. Intent's important.
Right. So, as in any emergency, in such times, God's children ought to fervently and earnestly pray for divine intervention. In doing so, the persons involved must prayerfully evaluate the medical diagnoses with the assistance of humane physicians and godly leaders, and make responsibly and with a clear conscience what will be a very painful decision.
Right, which is getting to the point you were making, which is some mothers may say, if it's me or the child, take me.
Yep.
In other words, take me out.
Sure.
And that is a no-win situation because you have you're trying to save the life of the mother, and it means in the process of saving the life of the mother, that's the intent. Yeah, the child cannot be saved.
Well, it's definitely you cannot avoid pain and suffering situation, as we started off with.
There will be pain. That's a better way of saying it.
And there's no point in talking about life as if that's not the case.
Yeah, if you've lived any length of time, there is pain and suffering. You may have had a charmed life thus far.
You may be experiencing pain and suffering right now listening to us. How about rape or incest?
Yeah, this one's a little more clear.
These atrocities do great damage to women and require a compassionate response on the part of the church. The father is guilty and should be held accountable by law. No duh. Absolutely. However, the child who is a result of that crime is completely innocent and should not be punished for the sin of the father. For the purposes of this discussion, the issue is not how the child was conceived. If the child in the womb is a human life made in the image of God, then it is worth protecting. Boop. Period. In such cases, adoption is a viable alternative to abortion.
Right.
Adoption, foster care, support of those who do. Christians in America, I looked this up, are 2.5 times more likely to adopt than non-Christians.
Oh, we're going to get into stats.
Let's bring it on.
Well,
there's much more about that. Yep. The emotional and spiritual toll, the abortion industry rarely, and I insert here purposely evades, advising pregnant women of the potential impact of abortion on their spiritual and mental health. Mm-hmm. I looked this up. I mentioned this last week. I do have the stats about it's approximately 4 times more crisis pregnancy centers that are almost all generally coming from a Christian worldview, in generic terms, than there are pregnancy abortion mills.
Okay.
Desperate.
I have a quote from J.D. Greer, which is similar. It says 3 to 1, but it may be because it's looking at the time frame, and your time frame was different. The point is, it's something like that.
The number of abortion clinics has been going down.
Yes, it has. Yeah, it has actually. Yeah. And in some states, there are no more.
Yes. Desperate women who find themselves in an acutely embarrassing or inconvenient position because of an illicit affair or an unplanned pregnancy, and who are often coerced by selfish lovers, embarrassed families, etc., are led to see abortion as a quick fix. Nothing could be further from the truth. Women are usually unaware of the depression, guilt, and shame that may plague them for a lifetime.
Or the men who pressured the woman into doing so.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I have heard them speak.
Oh, absolutely.
The pain they have for what they caused.
Yes. Without talking much about this, let me just insert real quick parenthetically. We see on the ground every single week multiple examples of the kinds of things we're talking about that people are working through ademptively over time in their lives, sometimes alone, sometimes with others, in the context of Christian community here.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
While God can and does forgive and heal the broken hearts of repentant sinners who come to him for forgiveness, the actual deed can never be undone and probably will be remembered with pain and regret.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. There is a definite emotional and spiritual toll that is an untold story in this.
Yeah.
The woman's right to choose. In recent years, the argument is made that since the woman alone bears the physical consequences of pregnancy, she should always have the right to choose freely an abortion. The laws of many nations now guarantee that, quote, right within varying durations and circumstances of pregnancy. As we've shown, however, today, there is no biblical basis for a pregnant woman to terminate her unborn child. And I'm adding here, regardless of socially constructed definitions of personhood rights or physical or bodily autonomy. The long historical tradition of Orthodox Christianity prohibits abortion. The legality of abortion in modern cultures is rooted in concepts of individual rights, autonomy, and privacy pushed far beyond scriptural teaching. We therefore expressly deny that the supposed legal, quote, right automatically confers upon the pregnant woman the moral right to abort her unborn child. And by the way, to those who claim that a man cannot make an argument against abortion, which I understand, and this came up a little bit before, and I'm not dumb. I'm not going to just start mansplaining. But the truth of an argument bears literally no significance whatsoever or meaningful connection to one's gender. That's an ad hominem that has nothing to do with the truth of the argument. Arguments do not have gender.
Right. It's either true or it's not true.
Yes.
It's called objective truth.
It is.
It's where the whole idea of intersectionality we would disagree with, that your position on an issue gives you more moral authority than someone else.
Correct.
The reality is either truth is objectively obtained and it can be argued, or it is not.
Yes. The lived experience as the root of our epistemology is a terrible way for a world to, well, it becomes anarchy.
Right. You or I may have experienced something practically that someone else has not.
Sure.
But the truth of that can be ascertained regardless.
Yes.
It's either true or it's not.
Whether empathy is a part of that.
Right.
Whether a personal therapeutic understanding of the trauma is there.
Yeah.
I would like to also say men provide 50% of the genetic code. There is no life without that. I'm not saying I make an argument for there's not something that goes on with a woman and that baby. There is something that goes on that we men don't quite track with.
Nope.
But I also would like to say that in 1973, Roe v. Wade was decided by 9 men. Mm-hmm. So if abortion cannot be decided upon by 2 men talking about the facts of the matter and trying to ascertain truth, then merely because we don't have the lived experience of a woman,
right,
then by that same token, we should absolutely overturn Roe v. Wade because men decided it.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Parenthetical stuff done. Christian action. Christians are called to be good citizens.
We had Christian obligation. Do we want to do that?
Oh, sorry. Yes. I'm on my updated version here. Christian obligation. We're called upon to be good citizens by impacting the state and the wider culture in positive ways. All citizens must have freedom of conscience on all private, moral, and ethical issues, since God alone is Lord of the conscience. However, the issue of equal protection of life under the laws of the state is not a private, but a public matter.
Right. The argument here is, you'll hear people say, well, that's a personal issue for them
important.
To decide.
Very important distinction, yes.
And there certainly are personal issues that
Sure.
people need to decide. And the point here is there are private, moral, and ethical decisions people have to make.
Yeah.
This is not one of those.
Yes.
The protection of life under the laws of the state is a public matter.
Yes.
So we should talk about this.
Yes, the government has an interest in this.
Yeah.
The Bible teaches all persons and nations are responsible before God for their moral and ethical decisions, including those that relate to the preservation of human life. Whenever abortion and other immoral, life-threatening practices present themselves, Christians have an obligation to address these evils in public forums and to seek legislative and judicial redress.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
All right. We probably should finish today. This next section is the stats that we mentioned last week about what Christians have done in this arena.
Yes.
Lest we believe the lie that Christians only care about the preborn. They don't care about the woman. They don't care about the child that's born afterward.
Yes.
Those are the lies that are perpetuated.
This is one of my silent, quiet to myself pet peeves.
Yes.
That we hear and see things that are argued from godless ideological understandings and statistics and told in ways that make it sound like, oh, you silly Christians, all you care about is these little that by the way have become political issues because, as you just said, we made a distinction. These are public issues,
Right.
So
and we assume that those things are true somehow.
Absolutely, and I think there is a grievous misunderstanding of the ways that the people of God are on the ground doing a ton of this kind of work all the time.
Yep.
There are many, many more Christians, even in just this small community, who are super actively engaged in providing for the unborn, poor, weak, and defenseless in every category of life, unborn all the way to death, to the tune of many, many dozens of families in our church and millions of dollars that don't show up on anybody's studies, but they show up on the tax forms.
Yeah. And yes, and we can rip through these quickly, but
let's do it.
But read this if you have a chance to look at the paper and pull up the links.
Christian action. We reject the lie that Christians only care about the preborn. Christians have led the way in caring for adoption and foster care. Since 1973, for every one abortion clinic in America, Christians have built 3+, some almost 4 pregnancy centers to assist women in crisis, buying groceries, helping them get housing, and much more. That's happening in our community all the time in ways that don't make the papers well. In foster and adoption agencies, the group represented most are Christians and their friends. I know that to be true. Christians have built more hospitals in the world than any other single group. There's not even remotely a comparison.
No, there isn't.
For many, many, many hundreds of years.
Yes.
The modern medical profession exists because Christians... Okay, anyway, for a long time in sub-Saharan Africa, there was not a single hospital that wasn't built by a Christian mission. We know some of those missionaries personally. According to ethicsdaily.com, 5% of practicing Christians in the U.S. have adoption, which is more than twice the number of all adults who have adopted. So it's 2% on average, 5% for Christians. And that is a pretty, by the way, wide definition
of Christians.
Christians.
And we'll get into evangelical.
A survey showed that 38% of practicing Christians had seriously considered adoption, while only 26% of all adults had. Most adoptive parents, 73%, are non-Hispanic whites, according to the Barna Group. However, they are less likely to adopt a Caucasian child. Only 37% of children adopted are Caucasian. That's an interesting stat.
It is.
Barna research found that practicing Christians may be over twice as likely to adopt compared to the general population, while Catholics 3 times as likely. Evangelicals, 5 times as likely. Practicing Christians are 50% more likely to become foster parents, almost twice as likely to consider becoming a foster parent. Christian giving to orphan care has grown roughly 3 times faster than all charitable giving by Americans for 4 years in a row.
These are current things now.
Yes. 437,000 kids are in foster care in the U.S. The church has responded by starting many, many faith-based agencies.
The list we have here: Project 127, The Call in Arkansas, www.4kids.us, Promise 686, 111 Project, Orphan Care Alliance, SafeFamilies.org, WaitNoMore.org, which is part of the Focus on the Family. These were all started recently. These are things within the last 20 years, many in the last 10 years, lest we think, well, that's historic Orthodox Christianity. No, the argument we're making here is in response to the needs, Christians are starting organizations, and it's spreading across.
There is an organic thing that Christians do that don't make the papers, and it's constantly happening in ways that that most folks are unaware of, because it's too easy to measure those things based on, for example, the CDC statistics about abortion don't account for many huge states because they're not required to turn in their statistics. So they see things sometimes from the government, and they assume that it is accounting for these kinds of things in ways that it doesn't remotely.
Yeah, and I read there are unfortunately some faith-based agencies that have had to close their doors because that particular state requires them now to change the definition of who can adopt.
Yes.
And forces on them a worldview which is not in conformity with their religious basis.
Right. There's not the religious exception clause for that part.
Right. In other words, if you're going to remain in these particular states open, then you must allow a gay couple to adopt or whatever, which goes against the worldview of the people who started that mission.
Yeah.
And so many states do still cooperate with the faith-based agencies, and that's how we see such great numbers being taken care of.
Which is to make the point that if we're going to be free market, then let them do their things.
Yeah.
And the idea that the government is amorally doing what it does is it's ignorance, at least.
Yeah, it's just sad to see so you can look up states that are more favorable toward letting faith-based agencies do their thing, and then ones that are less so, where they coerce them to change their worldview and thus end up putting them either under great stress or out of business, as it were.
Yep. So let's finish up.
Yep.
Church's responsibility. First Christian Church urges that the following steps be implemented to provide substantial support for those impacted by problematic and/or unexpected pregnancies. And we are confining most of Sanctity of Human Life to these issues of beginning and ending life.
Sure.
We're not talking about all of the ways
we can't possibly
that Christians can and should be involved in social services, etc. We should pray earnestly for God's intervention, wisdom, and courage to stop abortion. We should teach that abortion should never be used as a convenience or a means of birth control. We should vote for and support political candidates who fight for legislation to protect the unborn. We should work through legislative and governmental agencies to oppose the destruction of life. We should exert influence only in peaceable ways consistent with scriptural principles. We should provide compassionate guidance to a woman facing problematic or unexpected pregnancy, counsel the man involved regarding his personal responsibilities and obligations as a father, come alongside the woman who chooses life, seek ways to support and for care of the child, come alongside the woman who ends up being in a place where she has already chosen death and has to deal with the consequences of that, seeking ways to support and care for her. Support parachurch ministries and faith-based organizations and agencies that promote adoption and foster care. And as we just said, compassionately minister to those who have had abortions or supported abortions.
Right. I think it's important to point out here, we've listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is that 10? I think we have 10 bullet points.
Looks like it.
And the second half is all about effectively compassion.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the argument labeled at us is, well, all you care about is the stats and the numbers and the unborn. You don't care about the rest.
I think a lot of that has been straw man from the other side.
It is straw man, frankly, which is not a real argument.
Right.
So these last 5 bullet points provide compassionate guidance to a woman facing a problematic or unexpected pregnancy. Then counsel the man involved about his responsibilities and obligations.
What better place can they learn to be who God's created them to be as mothers and fathers?
Yeah. Come alongside that woman. Support and care for that child.
Yep.
Support ministries, faith-based agencies.
Yep.
And then lastly, compassionately minister to those who've had abortions or supported abortions.
Yeah. Greene County Young Life. That's good, Scott. That was a couple of weeks ago on Coffee Convos. Greene County Right to Life has that as a stated goal of theirs, is to compassionately minister to those who have had abortions.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up.
So this paper cannot possibly address every single issue or dilemma that may arise. In rare and unusual circumstances where the Bible does not speak directly, affected individuals ought to prayerfully seek godly counsel from the elders of the church and the guidance of the Spirit of God. All persons must finally give account to God for any actions that rob others of life, health, or dignity. With these eternal issues in view, First Christian intends to be a witness to the truth of Christ and a healing and redemptive agency to assist through its numerous ministries those who may be caught in these dilemmas.
And we do have ministries to do so.
And it happens all the time, even in ways that don't have names to a particular program that you assume have to be in place for that to be going on.
Right. If you are looking, by the way, locally for a foster adoptive agency that you could support, I would throw out there John and Wendy Kittsteiner's, which is called Because of Isaac. My wife and I have supported that.
Yep. There's also Isaiah House.
Yes.
There is Greene County Right to Life.
Yep.
There's also the Hope House.
Yep.
They've been around for a long time, and they're probably the largest in our community by far. And they do a lot of great work.
Yeah.
And a lot of our people have supported them for a long time.
Yeah. If that's not part of your regular giving, consider that. Pray about that with your spouse.
Yeah.
Because putting our money where our mouth is important. And it's something that my wife and I have talked and prayed and been convicted about to make sure that we do that.
So we got some questions.
Okay.
And now that we're an hour in, almost.
Well, it was either that or do a third week on it, and I didn't think that was wise.
I thought so too. Right. Let's not, extend this into the 5 weeks that it could be.
Right.
First question says, welfare in WIC as a means to fulfill a fuller life for children? ? Mark said that God's design is for human flourishing. Wondering at what point the church collectively looks away from children in absolute poverty who are not flourishing in this life. Talk to any educator in our community to learn how terrible tales of how children exist but do not thrive.
Yeah.
Does pro-life extend beyond that of birth?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. We simply cannot touch everything. It does. Christians of all, point out from your sermon on Sunday where Paul said, I went to those who appeared to be pillars. They added nothing to my argument except that I should remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do.
Right.
Yes, caring for the poor and those disadvantaged is all part of this, which is why, and I've said it before, we give specifically, and this one I can't claim on my tax return because it's not a 501c3.
Right.
We give specifically to support those who are extremely poor in Venezuela because of what has happened. Because I have a tie there with my mother.
Right.
But we support Open Doors. If you're looking for, an international agency which reaches out to persecuted Christians, there's Voice of the Martyrs, there's Samaritan's Purse, there's all sorts of things. And absolutely Christians are heavily involved in those as well, and including here in our local counties. Yes, the answer to all of that. We just simply can't enumerate it all.
Yes. And I think more of that is going on in ways that don't make the papers, that aren't well known. Regular giving from local churches is happening to the many, many, many millions of dollars every year, even just our community.
Yeah.
And that includes children in poverty, et cetera. I know also, and this is organic, but a lot of the teachers and social workers and people in law enforcement and the medical professions who are doing these kinds of things, and I'll say parenthetically, albeit from tax money, federally funded most of the time, or that kind of money, are doing that work professionally, all the time. Yeah. So it's not like and we as the church are not involved. It depends on how you want to define the church. And I also think this gets at some issues that are more complicated about the usefulness of welfare, because that's a stated thing here.
Yeah.
We don't have time to address that.
No.
But are we better off now with the government being in charge of that?
No.
I don't think so.
I would say no.
Now, the schools are the number one place in terms of reporting child abuse and reporting issues of a failure to thrive at a certain age for children to Child Protective Services, et cetera. And that's a function of their position and the context. So that makes sense. So I'm not sure as much of that is merely because there is a motivation to do something the church isn't. I think a piece of that is a bit of a straw man.
Okay.
Yeah. But of course, pro-life extends beyond birth.
Yes.
This question says, but given the fact that people will continue to have sex outside of God's design, how can we create an environment or in society that doesn't cause women to think abortion is the only or best option? I don't think most women are cavalier about the decision, but are feeling they don't have the resources, relational, financial, emotional, to care for a baby. How can we help? That is empirically true and less empirically true when they're connected to a local body of believers, in my experience, without question. Now, so that doesn't account for all the women on the planet, but I can't account for all the women on the planet. So my point being, women who are a part of us, we have relationship with, realize even though they may not personally have the relational, financial, and emotional resources that they know they need for that baby, being engaged in the Christian community meaningfully, I know this happens. I've helped it happen. Means that they know that they will have those kinds of things in ways that they need. And so that's a piece of them making decisions to go ahead and bear children, knowing that support is around.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if, I know we've said it in the past, but I want to say it again here. I think you'll agree, Scott. There are multiple victims in an abortion. The first one is the child whose life is ended. Mm-hmm. But the woman is also a victim who's been sold a lie.
Absolutely. That
is simply tissue, and the best choice for you is to discard it.
Yes.
They have been duped, and they have become a victim of a wider cultural phenomenon. And I think it would be wise for us to both state that, as I just did, so that we don't come across as pretending that the child is the only victim and that all the women who choose an abortion, as this person was pointing out, are not simply cavalier about this. Right. But they are also victims.
They may not be cavalier, but they may be believing a lie.
Well, yes, they clearly are believing a lie.
And that people will continue to have sex outside of God's design is not an argument for not saying this is the right and good and helpful thing to do in ways that help ensure that even non-believers and even people who don't feel well enough resourced will learn to take the responsibility to do what they need to do right by the baby.
Yeah. And one of the points we're making is there are resources that will help tremendously. That's why we named website after website after website.
Yeah. And I think there's not time to get to this.
No.
But there are some other things to talk about with this question.
Yeah.
Your statement on euthanasia was very strong, clear, and persuasive. However, that's a great next thing to say. Thanks.
Sure.
Just kidding. Your statement on euthanasia was very strong, clear, and persuasive. However, it's very often called humane for us to euthanize an animal which is chronically suffering and won't return to health. Why couldn't we apply similar logic of mercy, quote, mercy, to a human who is chronically suffering with zero hope of coming back to health and who chooses it? So?
Well, I think the first is the difference is the image of God.
Yes.
And that's not a minor point. That is a categorical difference.
Yes. A category difference is an important thing to say than most people recognize most of the time. Yeah. They think you're talking about, it's just a different thing. No, we mean it's a different category of existence entirely in ways that mean that to equate animal and human in an argument is a literal non sequitur.
Yeah. Yeah. We are given 2 commands in Genesis, and they both speak to this. One is to rule over the creation, which includes the animals,
Right.
as God would, exercising wisdom and judgment and discernment. And the other is to be fruitful and multiply humankind
Yes.
to reproduce the image of God. And so you have categorical differences right there, categorical differences. We do not treat those 2 the same way. The dominion over the earth is one aspect of stewardship. The reproduction of the image of God is completely different.
Especially when God says, hey, this stuff over here that you're called to steward, you can eat some of this.
Especially when he says that.
You can kill these things and eat them.
Said to Noah after he came out of the ark.
Yes. So those things don't have souls.
Right.
They're not made in the image of God.
Right.
And so we shouldn't necessarily apply the logic of that animal to that human.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Now, that doesn't mean there isn't gray area. And as we said, when the intent is to do good,
Yeah, there is
but
gray.
we can't prevent.
Right. People are going to die.
Right.
So there is gray, yes.
Yeah, that's our answer. Let's
Yeah.
stick with that. Last question. Are all forms of birth control considered to be wrong? Yep. Don't do it.
Are all forms of birth control.
It was somebody who came in late. I missed the beginning, so you might have already answered this. Go back next week. Last week.
Last week we
Yes.
addressed that. And
Yes, we did.
In our paper, very quickly, we said no, and we are not specifically identifying what is right, what is wrong. This is a wisdom issue for Christians.
Yes.
Because the Bible does not clearly say you cannot or you should. It doesn't do that. And there may be times when it would be wise not to have children. But we did say very specifically, the mandate of Scripture is to be fruitful and multiply.
Yes.
So if you're going to do otherwise, you better have a good reason for it.
Yes, there's a trajectory of do this thing.
And secondly, there's a difference between contraception and abortifacients.
Yes.
And those are the 2 things that make a difference in the qualification. So listen to last week.
So all those other principles and guiding thoughts from Scripture are what guide the wisdom issue about birth control.
That's all in this paper too,
Yes, indeed.
which is now 9 pages long.
Which on mine it goes to 10.
Oh, all right. We're late.
Well, we're always late.
Okay.
So we're
right
exactly
on time.
on time.
Excellent.
All right, great. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Brown Bags and Bibles. We hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you next week.
Yes.
Thank you.